Okay. Go.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So COVID-19 is the disease caused by this virus called SARS-CoV-2. There was a COVID-1 in 2000, and there's a sister virus called MERS and MERS in about 10 years ago. Both of them have now disappeared for no reason. And so there is a chance that SARS-CoV-2 tomorrow will just vanish without a trace. Now, I don't think it will happen, but the sister viruses all seems to be hiding somewhere. So this is a virus schematic. The virus, and you've seen it many times. These are the spike proteins started on the surface, and in the surface also you find other proteins in here. The envelope protein, M is the membrane proteins, and also there are some proteins in the nuclear, in the RNA portions of the virus. So these are the S, E, M, N, and all of them have been proposed to be used for vaccines targets. So these are the vaccines that are in the work. Some of them are life attenuated, which mean in the old days, we'll take a flu virus and keep passing it in eggs. And then after many passes, the virus are still alive, and it kind of lost the pathogenicity. So no longer be able to infect, but it's still alive. And you can use that as a vaccine. And we have many old vaccines made this way. We're still making inactivated vaccines. The Sinovac vaccine is one example. This is just a virus that is now dead. It still retains the antigens good enough to vaccinate people. There are virus particles that are shedded from the virus, and you can use that for vaccine. If you don't want to inject any part of the virus, you can purify the proteins, in this case, the spike, and then you make a cartwheel about it, and the company Novavax is actually making such a vaccine. Messenger RNA, that's the subject matter we want to talk about today, put out by Moderna and Pfizer. The Janssen's and others putting out DNA vectors, and then there are other vaccines called naked vaccines. It's just pure DNA that you inject into human. Now, altogether, there are a lot of vaccines in the work, and altogether there are 400 clinical trials of all sorts of vaccines. Some of them injected under the skin, some of them injected deeper, some of them spray into your nasal passage. So there are all sorts of vaccines in the work, but there are only 20 of them that are approved in some part of the world that are good for human consumption.
Hey, Herbert, just
Yes.
here, in case people don't know, Sino vaccine is the China vaccine.
Correct.
Okay.
And this is the vaccines that is not only using within China, but like Indonesia has been used very broadly. And this vaccine, definitely, it's a lot weaker. And we'll talk about it. Why is that this vaccine seems to be not very good for controlling not only Delta, but even the Gamma and Beta. So it is a lot weaker vaccines, and there's a reason for it, and we'll talk about it later. So the Moderna, Pfizer, and Janssen's, we'll only talk about these data tonight. And I talk about all the other vaccines in my last talk. And if you want to reference to that, and you get glory details of how they are made, the composition of them, and if you want to learn more about it, feel free to get a copy from David. So this evening, what I want to accomplish are these lists of questions. So we know breakthrough infections are happening. in vaccinated individual. And there's no doubt about it. It doesn't mean that the vaccines are no good. So we'll talk about that. You asked, I have been vaccinated. Why am I still worried about masking? And why even CDA make a gestures about 2 weeks ago, there was a 180 about face on masking policy. And at a time that 50% of us already been vaccinated. So why did they make that decision? I put in this link and you can take a look at it. There's actually a PowerPoint that was used by CDC director a week ago to present to Senate. And it was an internal document of CDC, but somehow it was leaked to Washington Post. So now we all have privilege to see exactly what the slides are. And in that, definitely, there is a about face of this masking policy, but they did not come out and say why. So tonight, I'm going to give you the reason behind it. Why is that this policy is made, and why is it, whether it is a right decision, and I leave it for all of you to decide after you hear the evidence. So obviously, this is not the end all vaccines. Otherwise, you won't have this whole list of vaccines that people are working. The vaccines we have, you hear that it's good and it's still good, but there are bad news, very bad news about this current vaccines. And well, we need to talk about it. So if there's anything that you're going to retain memory of the talk tonight, number 3 and number 4 is what I want you to remember, because it is significant. It is going to impact all of our lives for months to come. And in fact, we are actually at a very important crossroad. So the questions, how does the Delta variant comes about? And how do we, more importantly, how do we stop it? And how do we stop variants, from popping up? I'm going to tell you, not only we now have Delta, we already have Lambda. Things like these are like hurricanes, just keep coming up, right? And Lambda actually came in at a very bad time. Japan has a outbreak of Lambda during the Olympics. So I hope that doesn't mean that we're going to have another round of new variants coming in a few months, but it's something that we have to watch with close eyes. David, is my audio's coming in okay? So you asked, I recovered from COVID, but why do I need vaccines? Maybe not, but we need to look at it. How safe are the current vaccines? The short-term side effects, long-term side effects, and even on the internet, we're now hearing that maybe the spike proteins that are created, newly created spike proteins by these vaccines, maybe they're toxic to us. Are these just a myth? People just spread lies. So we're gonna take a look. So we're not going to, I'm not going to give you evidence from any of the YouTube videos that I don't know where they're getting the data from. So I know where I'm getting the data from. A lot of these are real life clinical data that are between January and July. A lot of them are published in the Congressional Journal, searchable through PubMed. And a lot of these are from Trade Journal and also from CDC own publication. When I give you information from YouTube, I will tell you that. But rest assured that I don't try to spread information that I don't know where they're coming from. So this is the gist of what the virus is doing in our body. So we have a COVID coming into your nose, go through your esophagus and get into the lung and latch onto this receptors, the famous ACE2 receptors, and then the virus get pulled into the cells. So here is the cells, there's the nucleus where all your DNA, RNA reside, and outside of the nucleus is where we make proteins. It's called cytoplasm. right? And then the machine that's making all these proteins are called Golgi apparatus, uh, and I gave a long discourse on it in the last videos. So if you want to look at it, it's all there. But once the virus get in, and it will shed the coating, the envelope, and then the viral messenger RNA will then be released. It then hijacked our own cell mechanism, which is a ribosome, which is a factory to make protein. So the virus, through this messenger RNA, hijacked our ribosome and start making protein for itself, according to whatever the message encoded on the messenger RNA. So it's making the buffet that doesn't benefit us, but only benefits the virus. And then when it package all of the proteins, and then it erupt, and then the viral particle get released from the cells, and these viral particles are then available to infect other cells in your body. So that's how the reproductive cycle works, or the replication cycle works, shouldn't call it reproductive cycle. And the problem with this being a RNA virus is this. So if you look at the scales of things in terms of how big, well, in terms of size of the genomes, right? So humans are very complex. We have a large genomes. We have a lot of DNA. We have a lot of information. If you go to a single cells like amoeba, they have a lot less DNA encoded because they don't need a lot of information to survive. If you go to bacteria, it's about the same. But if you go to viruses, genomes are very small, right? So what's inside this virus doesn't have a lot of information. This messenger RNA, it's all that is in the COVID, right? But if you compare the DNA virus and RNA virus, there's a starking contrast. DNA has a lot of controls during replications. It's self-check error. So kind of like if you have a wrong spell check, there are mechanisms in the DNA to kind of read and reread and spell check and correct. RNA viruses don't have a lot of these mechanisms built in, so they are more promiscuous. They are more prone to.
You know what? I don't know how to do that. And it froze.
Oh.
I don't know.
So this, when it comes to RNA virus, one of the characteristics is it mutates.
I don't want to press this because it's gonna.
That's all they can do.
The only thing he can do.
If you look at what we have seen since the virus came out of Wuhan, China, it has successively made changes on the coding. Now we know it's making changes in the spikes, but there are also changes in other parts of the viruses, but the spike protein is what we track. So when I'm saying that it's making changes, when it goes from the G614D to alpha to beta to gamma to delta, it's indicating that some part of the spike protein on the surface is being altered, and because of these promiscuous RNA control methodology that allow the virus to mutate. Now, that's all the virus know, because it get into the cells, it just replicate. There's nothing else the virus will do, and all it want to do is get into the cells and replicate. Well, too bad, in the last year, we have given this virus a huge stage for them to hone their skills of changing the code. We have infected 200 million humans now. And if each human give the virus 10 replication cycle, that's 2 billion times the virus, this particular virus, can learn how to mutate and how to make these. Now, granted that not every mutations are beneficial for the COVID, right? So these iota, eta, epsilon, we know they're there, but they don't do anything. And over all these multi-billions replication cycle, we only have these variants that we know have gain in function. So they're not very efficient, but for whatever they did, they now came up with a Delta variant that is super dangerous. I put in here, not only we have billions of cycles, we allowed the virus to hone the scales. Along the way, we are also allowed 17 million minks in the Netherlands last year. They also passed from humans to minks and back and forth. And there's another 17 million times. And because of this, the virus went from G614D to a version that is very much entrenched in the alpha. And even this particular mutation is no longer exists because the Delta totally overwhelmed all the predecessor. So the virus will keep mutating. It will do whatever is best because it will find a version that will give them survival benefit, and the survival benefit in the Delta case, it improves a lot more people a lot faster. At some point, our immune system, whether we get it from natural infections or whether it's from vaccines, and all of our personal behaviors will counter this viral survival, and then we'll achieve an equilibrium. And this equilibrium will become what I showed up here, and COVID or SARS-CoV-2 will join this long list of RNA viruses and becomes endemic and live among us for years to come. And if you look at these RNA virus lists, a lot of them are nasty, the Ebolas, the flu, just long list of nasty viruses, including HIVs. They're just among us. And COVID will be quiet at some point. It will be endemic. And I hope that day will come soon. So what is vaccine? So vaccine helps to create a long-term memory to pathogens so that when we do encounter them in the natural setting, our immune systems will recognize that quickly and then to seek and destroy the germs first time, every time, before they can hurt us. That's all it does. So vaccine does it by generating what I call a sterile inflammation. So the virus giving us a infection, the vaccines are giving us a sterile inflammations so that it can provoke the immune response to recognize whatever the germs we wanted to remember, okay? So most of us, after taking the vaccines, will have a good response. And most of you, I hope you've been vaccinated, you have a response. I bet you have a very decent response. For those who don't respond, and there are quite, I'm sure there are quite a few of them, every vaccines have non-responded. And people who don't respond, obviously, they have no protection. Right? They're at risk for infections. But there are also people on the other end of the spectrum, their immune systems are somewhat dysfunctional, or they are overreactive immune system. These people will look at the vaccines and will come up with issue with it, and these will show up as adverse event, as side effects. We're going to look at some of those as we move forward. So these are the vaccines. These are the 4 vaccines most popular: the messenger RNA vaccine by Moderna, the DNA vaccines by J&J, the Russians, and the Europe. Novavax make these protein subunits, and then the Sinovac have these inactivated vaccines. So even though we're only going to focus on these 2, but I just want to give you a comparison. The inactivated virus is really old technology. That's how we make vaccines for the last 50 years, all right? So essentially, China is still putting out this vaccine because it's easier to make, it's cheap, but it's not very good, all right? It needs to have a thing called adjuvants to help your body to recognize the vaccines. Right? By itself has issue. We don't like it, so that's why we're moving to newer platform. the protein subunits, it's a 30 years old technology, right? We have a lot of vaccines that are made with protein subunits so that you don't have to inject virus or any part of the virus. You only inject the proteins of interest for the immune system to see. And then in this particular case, Novavax make it into a cartwheel, and it's a Q systems. Also, it has some merit. And as I said, that platform is 30 years old. And the DNA vector virus, it's, I would say, 5+ year experience with the adenovirus. But adenovirus, we already have vaccines for about 10 years. And now we're using the adenovirus, we weaken it, and then we put a DNA of the spike viral DNA in it, and then we make it a vaccine. With the messenger RNA, it's just a messenger encoded, encrusted in a lipid membrane. It's a new technology. We don't have experience in it, but the research world has worked on it for about 10 years. As far as the delivery agents, none are needed for the proteins and the inactivated virus, but the DNA vaccine do need the adenovirus as a carrier. So the adenovirus, I call it a Trojan horse, and we use that to carry the payload. In this case, the viral spike and into the human cells. And here we don't need any fancy carrier. It's just a lipid, and it will deliver the messenger RNA. Adjuvant is something that it will notify the body that something here that I need you to pay attention on is needed for the inactivated virus and also protein subunit, and is not needed for the new platform. So I'm happy that we shared this, because this all by itself will get rid of a lot of the side effects. The inactivated virus needs something to grow in, and human cells, it's one that they use to grow it in. The DNA vaccines also require the human cells to grow the DNA, and so both of these require human cells. And here they don't use human cells; they use insect cells to grow the proteins. And so this is the unique intellectual properties. Here, the messenger RNA vaccine is the simplest. Doesn't have adjuvant, doesn't have fancy carrier. It also doesn't require any cells to grow any part of the vaccine. So this is really the simplest form of vaccines and the most modern vaccine concept. And not only that, because we are not using the proteins and the whole virus, we're using the genetic code. It allowed us to change rapidly. So if today the Delta becomes lambda, becomes epsilon, if need be, we can change the messenger RNA codes to keep up with the viral mutation. So it has a lot of advantage. I know a lot of people worry about adenovirus. Why are we fighting a viral infection with another virus? Do we need that? But it is a new platform now. We're using the adenovirus and lentivirus as the vehicles to treat cancer now with great successes. So I'm sure this platform is not going to go away. It will just be more and more drugs going to come on this platform. So the vaccine, from FDA point of view, probably is the most difficult drugs to approve, because unlike cancer drugs, you're treating sick people. So if you treat someone who have terminal cancer, your expectation is very low, right? So if the patient die, yeah, too bad. But here we are treating totally normal individuals. Most of us are normal, but if by taking the vaccines, we're making normal people sick, it is a crime. So FDA pay, trust me, a lot of attention on safety data. So the two things required for FDA to approve a drug vaccines, it's protective power and safety. So, all right, let's go to some of these things in detail. So how effective are the three vaccines we have approved in the United States? I'm going to show you some of the data from Israel, from Singapore, from Europe, and from US. And these are all real life data collected from January to July. And so if you look at the current vaccine tracker in the United States, where 51% of the populations are fully vaccinated, the fully vaccinated definitions is this: you have to have 2 doses of the Pfizer or Moderna vaccines, not 1 dose, 2 doses, and then you get 1 dose of the Janssen vaccines greater than 14 days before you get exposures to the virus. So, you know, if you get the viral infections within 14 days, the vaccines may not be, your body immune systems may not be geared up to clear the virus. That's what it's saying. So fully vaccinated, it's 2 doses and 1 dose of Janssen. It only given to people greater than 12 years old. So less than 12 are not eligible for now. And we're looking at the Israel data because Israel is a country that first adopted the Pfizer vaccines, and now they have, I would say, about 80% of the populations already vaccinated. So it's a good place to study the vaccine effect, and it's already published. So when Israel adopted the Pfizer vaccines in January, there was a lot of infections in the Israelites. At the time, when Pfizer applied for the emergency approval, we only know of the Pfizer vaccine effectiveness is in about 94 to 95%. But at that time, we all criticized the results. Say, well, at the time, the world's only have seen the alpha. So which means all of the clinical data are all based on the alpha variant. What about now we have the beta, the gamma? Is this 94, 95% still hold water, right? Or maybe, you know, if you consider all these variants, maybe this will go down to, you know, 70, 60%. So with Israelites being the first to adopt, we have the opportunity to look at their performance. So this is the result that was published in July. These are different categories, the overall result. Oh, so this is the incidence of COVID infections in 100,000 person days. And so this is the unvaccinated, you have 91 incidents among the 100,000 individual. Here in the fully vaccinated group, it's only 3. So this is a effectiveness of vaccines at 94%. So it's not bad, right? It's still even with all these variants, the original effectiveness of 94% still holds. So if you split up the analysis of these, you know, 100,000 data points, if you divide it into different subgroups, and how does it flip? So if you look at the vaccines may protect you, the vaccines will, you know, even if you come across with the virus, you may become asymptomatic, right? So then, and then we see that the effectiveness of the vaccine is 90%. How about controlling the symptomatic infections? In the unvaccinated group, there are 32, and the vaccinated group, it's 0.8. So it's even better, 96%. If you look at the hospitalization rate, they're 4.6 versus 0.3. And then really severe ICU type of hospitalizations, 2.7 versus 0.2. It's 97% effectiveness. And so, you know, also mortality, you know, it's, and so if you look at it, this vaccines, it's really still good, even in the face of all these variants. Now, of course, now we have a different questions. Well, now when the vaccine, when this study was done, the Delta variant is just coming up the rank. So I'm sure a lot of these data, it doesn't really include the Delta patients in it. So what happened now, we are in the Delta era. So then we have to go back to this questions. Why is that CDC make a about face on masking at a time when 50% of us have already been vaccinated? And also look at the last set of data. The vaccine works so well. So why is that CDC makes such a bold decisions that we all have to go back to mask, right? I'm going to bring you to a set of data that was published in August from Singapore. So they study the serum characteristics and also the virologies in Delta variants. All right, so a lot of these are Delta infected individual, and these are a lot of them are vaccinated individuals. So they are truly breakthrough infections in vaccinated folks that are caused by Delta variant. So this is interesting study, right? So if you look at the data set, on the left side is the unvaccinated, and on the right side is the vaccinated. And if you look at, obviously some of them have breakthrough infections in the vaccinated group. A lot of them are asymptomatic, but quite a few are symptomatic. So if you look at the two groups in terms of fever, the vaccinated groups have a lot less fever. The vaccinated group also have a lot less coughing within the group. In terms of shortness of breath, 17 versus 1. That's a big difference. Pneumonia is 69 versus 9. Whether someone need oxygen supplement, 27 versus 2. And none of the vaccinated end up in ICU versus 7 out of 130 in the unvaccinated group end up in ICU. And then a few of them die, and no one died in the vaccinated group. So the performance of the vaccines, and greater that this is also, most of them are Pfizer vaccine, a few of them the Moderna, but more or less is the messenger RNA vaccines. So messenger RNA doesn't seem to do so bad with Delta as well. All right. So the key takeaway is the current vaccine is still good in preventing symptomatic infection as well as severe Delta infections, hospitalizations, and death. Now let's see what's the mechanism in doing that. So if you look at someone just get infected, the vaccinated group has a lot of antibody. These antibodies are the key vehicles to get rid of the virus. That's why the vaccinated group flares so well. Compared to the unvaccinated group, there's no antibody to fight virus. You see the result. Right? So, but then over the course of infections, our bodies start making rudimentary antibody, and even within this 20 days, the antibody quality is not very good. But you already see that the antibody coming up and to fight infection. So from day 1 to 3, you already see a robust anti-spike protein antibody in these individuals. And you also see that this is let me explain to you what this is. The CT value is a surrogate, it's a proxy to indicate what is your load of virus in your specimen. So the lower the number, the more virus in your, I assume these are throat swabbed or nasal swab. So in the nasal swab, these guys have a lot of viruses, all right? And rightfully so, you just get infected. Right? And rightfully so, the antibody just starting to kick in. So you are going to have a lot of viruses. So remember, viral load is an indications of how much viruses in your specimens indicate the infectivity or the infectiousness of your sample. So you can see that the vaccinated groups over time clear and it worked well. So vaccine works. So if I have to borrow Dr. Walensky's CDC director's presentations, which was leaked to the public, and they actually disclosed to the Senate that the vaccines reduced the disease incidence by 8-fold, reduced the hospitalizations by 25-fold, and by the death by 25-fold as well. Now, this applied to more or less the alpha, beta, and gamma, but when it comes to delta, it's a little bit worse. How much worse? We don't have those numbers, but it, looking at the data, it will not be outrageously low, but it will not be as good as these.
Hey, Herbert, can
Yes.
you explain this particular graph, the one with viral load? That was so important because you explained that earlier to me that the first week, the infectivity of the vaccinated patient practically make no difference compared to that of non-vaccinated people. And that's why the wear mask Monday come from. Can you go over detail about that?
So here lies the big problem. So I want you to focus on then the initial 3 or 4 days, what happened. So this is the same set of data. So these individuals, if you look at the samples, whether vaccinated group or non-vaccinated group, you sample if you take a look at the swab coming from these groups, all of them carry a large load of virus. So subsequently, in a Wisconsin data by the University of Wisconsin Medicine, looking at 11 counties in Wisconsin between June and late June and early July, and look at all the breakthrough infections. There were about 27% of them, total of 291 cases, with 79 of them fully vaccinated. All of them, luckily, have mild symptoms. But again, when they look at the samples, they cannot distinguish the amount of virus in the samples, whether it's coming from vaccine or non-vaccinated person. So this is a graph they saw. So again, the CT value is a proxy for the amount of virus in the samples. The lower the CT values, the higher the amount of virus. So when I say the viral load is high, which means the number of viral particles in the sample is very high. And if you look at the breakthrough infections, those, whether it's vaccinated or non-vaccinated, you really cannot tell. So it's telling you that even if you're vaccinated, in the beginning of the course of the exposure, you can still carry a large number of virus in your nose and in your mouth. And guess what? If you're going to a party and let's say July 4th festival, well, guess what? You may be a spreader, right? Well, guess what? During July 4th in Provincetown, there was an outbreak and there was a large gatherings and in multiple festivals and breakthrough cases was as high as 74%. So out of the 469 COVID cases, there were 346 of them were fully vaccinated. 5 of them require hospitalizations and 1 was severe enough that died. And again, if you look at this set of data, you cannot tell whether just by the number of viruses in a specimen, whether someone's vaccinated or unvaccinated. So let me not belabor on it. And this is the European data showing you the same thing. So the implication here is huge. So during the early phase of breakthrough infections, the vaccinated individual may have very high virus count that can spread to others, right? So it's really not good. So those who have high level of community or occupational exposure, like doctors, they're all vaccinated. They may be, exposed to viral virus again, and maybe they're not getting sick, they're asymptomatic, but there are a few days after the exposure, that person may be carrying enough virus to spread to the colleagues without them even knowing it. So masking and distancing remain an important tools for vaccinated and unvaccinated individuals, because we cannot predict who are the one who's going to have breakthrough infections, and when breakthroughs occur, whether the person is carrying the high viral load and for how long, right? So it is important enough that CDC did an about face looking at these set of data and say, we cannot take chances, and we just need to go back to personal protection. So the good news is the vaccine, even in the face of Delta, it still protect us from severe symptoms, hospitalizations, and death, even in breakthrough infections. It applies to Moderna, Pfizer, and the Janssen's. But of course, it's less protections with the Sinovac and other vaccines. It also, the breakthrough infection cases are high on occasion, and there was no, even though we see breakthrough infections now more and more, but there's no proportional increase in severe diseases in vaccinated folks and death. So that's good, right? So, I can emphasize it more. The vaccinations is important, public health measure is important. And you ask, well, forever? No, until we have a better vaccine. Let me explain it. So until we have a mucosal vaccines that trigger both IgA and IgA. So if you look at our first portals when the vaccines come in, this is our mucosal area. So a lot of the mucosal immunities relied on IgA, which is a type of, there are 5 types of immunoglobulins. IgG is the one that you always hear about with the neutralizing antibody. IgA is secreting into our saliva, into our nose lining, and it is the mucosal immunity that prevent us from a lot of the mucosal infections in the nasal pharynx, right? All of the vaccines, that long list of vaccines that I showed you, they're all injected into the muscle. As such, they only elicit IgG and not IgA. So even though it protects against the lung infections, systemic infections in the blood, they're not efficient to clear viruses in the nasal cavity. So during those couple of days, when your antibody it's not very high, your body is just recognizing, hey, there's something here I need to clear, but it does a good job in the lung and in the blood, but it's not so good in clearing viruses in the nasal cavity. And you're walking around with a load of viruses, not knowing that you're carrying it, and within these few days, you can spread to individuals. So another question is on reinfections. So whether you are vaccinated or not, hopefully you don't get reinfections. And you said, if I recover from COVID and have some immunity in my blood, do I still need vaccines? So let's take a look at some of the data. In Kentucky, and I think May and July, there was 738 residents who had recovered from the initial bout of COVID, and 250 of them later on test positive for Delta in between May and July. So about, not quite a year later. they get exposure again, and 33% of them are now positive again. So if you look at the data, the vaccinated group among them actually have 50% less infections. So you can even with reinfections, you can cut the exposure rate by 50%. So after infections, after 90 days, do go get your vaccine. So here's the patients, whether we get the antibody after, whether we get the antibody after infection, after natural immunity. We activated in our body T cells and T lymphocytes and B lymphocytes, and the B lymphocytes are the one that's making antibody. The T lymphocytes are the one that recognize cells in our body that are infected with virus, and the T cells will go in and directly kill them. Don't know why I have these lines on my screen. I hope you don't see it. I see it. So in this illustration, I want to show you is.
We see it too.
You see it too. Okay. Hopefully the next screens it will disappear. So if you get exposed to the B117, B117, and then you get infected with B117 again, and obviously you clear the infection very fast. But if you get infected with another strain, then you may get a breakthrough infections. That's how it happens. So in fact, if you look at other breakthrough infections that in this particular case, breakthrough infections are mostly by alpha, you in fact see that the antibodies are controlling the alpha reinfection. Well, there's only less than 1%. So it tells you the vaccine does work. The variant does erode the immunity. Hopefully it doesn't erode it severe enough that we lost our protection. So here you hear this in the newspaper all the time. This couple actually, the girlfriend got vaccinated. The boyfriend came back from the trip. It was unvaccinated, passed on the virus to the girlfriends. Luckily, because she was vaccinated, her infection was mild, and she was okay. You look at Lindsey Graham's, he also had a breakthrough infection, but luckily he said he's also doing okay. He doesn't feel he feels quite well, and he credit to the vaccines for his mild symptoms. So how does things come about? I'm going to have to step a little faster. So I'm going to let you listen to this.
What gives the coronavirus its unmistakable look, and scientists think it may be a key to why new variants of the virus are becoming more transmissible. This is her main location, where the virus attaches to human cells and infects them.
Herbert, can you turn up the volume?
Yeah.
My computer is actually the highest.
Okay.
We can't hear.
We can hear.
You cannot hear. So let me narrate. So the spike is made out of 3 identical parts, and the spikes can open up, and when it's open up, it now can infect cells. So when they open up, it can then infect the lung cells through the ACE receptors. So there's a mutation here occurred in this one proteins, right? And so I just want to show you, visually, this is how you can see when we call variant and it happens on the spike proteins. And if I unravel this spike into a linear bead, and each bead represents an amino acid. In our body, there are 21 amino acids, and they're all like this. So if I make it into a bead and I daisy chain it into a necklace, and then I fold it in some fancy way, it becomes the spike, and that's what the spike is made out of. So in UK, this is the UK profile. So when it first started in Wuhan, the virus have in this position 614 number of amino acid. It has a D is the aspartate. So somehow in the 3 months after it comes out of China and get into Europe, that this one particular amino acid, because of mutation, it changed from a D from aspartate to a glycine. And because this has 3 parts, so these mutations occur in 3 places on the spike. And because of that one mutation, the virus gained in function. Now the virus replicates much faster. So every time this person cough, it cough a lot more viruses. And all because this spike, because of these changes, is now open up more efficiently. Because it opened up more efficiently, it can latch onto the receptor more efficiently. So because of these one change, we're seeing the world now starting to have a lot more individuals infected with the virus. And in UK, you see a slight blip. And I told you there was an incidence with 17 million minks, which occurs around the June to September timeframe. And because of that, the virus, instead of changing the part, the virus actually smart enough to delete the part that our antibody recognize. So just say, hey, you're attacking me with that part, I'm just going to delete it. So the deletion mutation, so to speak, it's infected as a result of the mink to human infections, and that becomes the UK variant, and we see that very prevalent in September timeframe. And then, so every time I make these gestures, this is position 501, it's changing from an N to a Y. So they're all change, just substituting one amino acid with the other. And then that becomes the beta, which originated in South Africa, and then gamma in Brazil. And combination of that becomes a new forms of alpha in UK. And when UK thought they were okay, and the alpha plus start coming to cause problem. And now we have an epsilon, but doesn't in the US, but epsilon seems to be moving away and make way for the delta. That 2 version of delta seems like the kappa is not very important, but the delta is something that it's causing huge problem. And it's all because of these amino acid substitutions. And with that, there's a gain of function now with the Delta virus. Not only it grows faster, the virus, once you get exposed in the old version, it won't show up in the specimens until 5 to 6 days later. But with Delta, it shows up very fast in 3 to 4 days. And then I told you the Lambda is coming, right? The Lambda originated from Peru. And seems like it's already in many parts of the world. Japan has an outbreak during Olympic. So let me not, so you have some ideas. So now the Delta is prevalent. It's now really replacing the Alpha, replacing the Gamma. If you look at all these samples in the hospital now, and you do the gene sequence, and gene sequencing can identify what strains of virus in the samples. And now more or less it's, today I heard that it's 95% of the samples. You almost don't see the alpha and gamma anymore. So what does it mean? So this is the YouTube now. So and you can go to this YouTube, and they compared the delta in 2 ways. One is with the infections, whether the antibody that are made, the vaccines that are made that induce antibody, whether it can neutralize the virus. And it shows that seems like it can still control the virus quite well. The Pfizer, 80, 70%, the Moderna, I think this is like 80 to 88%. The Oxford, quite well, the J&J, quite well. In terms of hospitalizations, according to the publication, seems like it's up to still at about 90%. So it's not that. And if you don't like the YouTube videos and you want to read the journal articles, you can actually go to this article to look at some of these things in details. The Novavax, even though the Novavax is not an approved vaccine, they have delayed it to ask for FDA approval for emergency use. I think it's delayed it until December, but the controlling the virus is still okay. Oops. I lost my screen. So I have to share the screen again. Give me. Can you still see my screen? I'm gonna have to fast forward to where I was at. Seems like there's a gremlin or something. So the Janssen's, you go take a look at it. Seems like the efficacy is still good even against Delta. So what are the vaccine safety, short-term and long-term? So we now have 360 million doses in the US. So if you combine with the doses given in the world, it's a very substantial amount of data we're looking at. The run-of-the-mill, I have pain, I have fever, I have 101 fever, fatigue, I have all of them. So these are expected side effects because the vaccine is supposed to induce a steroid inflammation, right? So it's expected. And I just did a search on the adverse events reporting system, and you can go do it yourself. And I look at these vaccines and I look at life-threatening events, and it came out 8,000. So, so out of 360 million doses, you have 8,000. So the incidence. So just want to compare it with flu vaccines. Last year, we dispensed 200 million doses. There were 3,000 serious side effect. Nobody died. Serious side effect, allergy and whatnot. But the effectiveness of the flu vaccine is only 70%. In fact, if I look at the data from the last 10 years, we have never gone beyond 70%. Most of the time, it's in the middle 50. Here, we have a vaccines in the 95% with side effect incident rates very, very respectable. So, of someone who worked in the field for so many years, I'm really happy with these vaccines. Now, is it problem-free? No. We have anaphylaxis. Of course, out of these 8,000 anaphylaxis, we have myocarditis, pericarditis problem, but even though they're all treatable, the incidence per million, it's 12 cases. And all in male under 30, they're all treatable. Guillain-Barré, you hear about it, but that's mostly associated with J&J. Blood clots in Janssen's, and in recent days you hear about it. So they are there, but what you see is these. I call it long-term effect because a lot of them they're not going to go away. And some of these long-term effects, we don't see the antibody disease enhancement yet. It's one of the worry that the antibody may enhance the COVID infection, but luckily we haven't seen it. It is something that was worrisome in the previous version of COVID, but we haven't seen it, but it's something that we keep a close eyes on. Most of these symptoms are what I call an autoimmune related. So remember, I told you, everybody's response to vaccines in a different way. If you have a somewhat dysfunctional immune system, or your immune system is overreacting, you may get side effects. And all of these, if you look at the medical journal, has somewhat a link to autoimmunity, right? Either overreacted or the immune systems went haywire, but they're not just happening to anyone. There is a genetic background of certain individual that fit this profile that will have this kind of thing. So don't want everybody to kind of worry about this shadow issues. If you don't have any of these problems, then rest assured, likely you're going to respond to the vaccine appropriately, and you'll be all right. There's some rumor mills going around that's saying the newly made spike proteins are created by vaccines is actually toxic to cells. There are some reason behind it. I don't want to go into it. But if you look at the vaccines, you look at the spike proteins that are made through these vaccines, they are not the natural version. These versions are engineered spike proteins. They retain the shell, the spike shell, the shape, so that it can stimulate the immune response, but they cannot fuse with your cell membrane and get into your cells to initiate biological function. So it just flow around, get onto the cells, do its thing, stimulate the T and B cell response, and then they gobble up by the macrophages and get degraded, and that's all it is. For the sake of time, maybe I should. Well, let me be brief on it. So we have 3 very good vaccines. So these vaccines currently used in the US, they don't have live virus in it. So none of them will cause the COVID-19 disease. It will take your body sometimes to build up immunity after vaccination. So if you get exposed to it, you may get infected with the virus, even if you are a newly vaccinated person. You may get overwhelmed by virus in your nasal space and becomes breakthrough infections. So breakthrough occurs. Caution is still warranted that we have to use masks and the personal hygienes. The viral loads can be very high, even in the vaccinated group, when it comes to Delta. And I think we all should do our fair shares so that to keep other people safe, especially kids under 12 years old. They're not eligible for vaccines, and now we are seeing that the younger folks are getting into the hospital. And in fact, you look at the internet, the news is everywhere now. The kids are showing up in the hospital. Now, granted that a lot of them are teenagers, but whether it will migrate down to the less than 10 years old, it's something that it's worrisome. So I would say for me, I would take the vaccines because I want to keep. I don't want to be the one who's spreading virus. Okay. What else do we have? So this is important. I want to make a point. So I told you that you always hear about the B cells making antibody. It's all over the news ever. What you don't know is this is only one weapons we use to control virus in our body. One major mechanism is we engage the T lymphocyte, and these T lymphocytes will actually see the virus infected cells and go in and kill the cells that are infected with virus. Now imagine that if you have a virus buried inside the cells, antibody is not very effective. So for the most part, when the virus are gone from your bloodstreams and your nasal space, you're left with a lot of cells that are infected with viruses. Well, who's going to take care of them? The T cells are the one that's going to go in and kill them. All right. So if you go to look at the vaccine brochure from all three companies, they talk at length about the B cells and the T cell immunity. And the reason I want to tell you is that if you understand how the immune system works, you probably won't be too worried about after now you're vaccinated, what kind of protections you have. Is my protections going to go away? Let me give you the nutshells of what the immune system is doing. And I want you to see something that to me, it's amazing because I see the glory of God in the immune systems. So here we go. So what's the purpose of the immune system, right? The immune system is designed to handle all kinds of threats, internal to our body, external to our body. Okay? External to our bodies are the viruses, the fungi, the parasites, the bacteria, and these are what I call non-self, right? They are not part of us. They are something that invade us. And then internally, they are also something that is not part of what we got from day one when we were a baby. Cancer cell is not one of them. Cancer cell is a foreign cell, it's a non-cell, right? Cells that are the proteins gone bad. These are the Alzheimer, the Parkinson's. Our body can recognize them and get rid of them because all of these things are internal threat that we define as non-self. How do we know that something is self and non-self? Because from day one, our immune systems is already starting to work for years to educate our lymphocytes, every single tissues and every single molecules that you have in your body. And also, you don't know there are 50 trillions of friendly bacteria in your gut. You also know every single one of them. And they also presented as part of self, all right? So by knowing self, you can define what are the external threat, and when the external threat comes, you shoot them off. Okay, so the purpose is to preserve ourselves against these non-self threat. And the way to do that, and I cannot give you 2 minutes immunology in one slide, and it takes many textbooks. But in the nut and shell, the way that our immune system works is we have these sea of self and non-self peptides that we manage, and these are peptides. Right? If you daisy change the beads amino acid, these are peptides, and we educate the T and B cells. That's how we control things. That's how we survive. And these peptides are encoded in a library controlled by 3 very important barcodes. And I want to give you a cartoon. So this is how these things work in high magnifications. So how does this cells, once it get the information, this is called the antigen presenting cells of macrophages, how does it pass along the information to T cell and B cells, right? By barcodes. There are barcodes that it pass on. This is a COVID spike protein information. That's how this T cells get educated. And that's how this B cells get educated and know how to make antibody against the spike, right? Because they have these peptides in the middle. And this is the cue part. Because of the T and B cells, we generated in our body after vaccines or after infection, and armies of these memory cells. Each memory cells will remember these peptides, And the next time your body see the COVID again, it will spring into action. It will make antibody, and it will raise army of T cells to get rid of the invaders. Okay? These three barcodes allowed us to handle really astronomical numbers, combinations of external threat. It's an understatement. I see really just as numerous as the star in the sky. And this is how I see the intelligent design as the glory of God. Right? Literally, our body is endowed to handle any threat. Can you imagine that? There's a virus tomorrow that you don't know what it is. But after a few rounds of it, your body, you'll survive, hopefully. And if you survive, you have memory cells to handle the new virus, even though you have never seen that virus today. So it gets to the point, how long will your vaccine memory last? The natural antibodies are expected to wane fast because you don't want a lot of these things hang around, right? To conserve energy in your body, you want to get rid of, raise the antibody, get rid of the viruses, and then you shut down the fire and you let the body rest. The T and B cells also, the T cells will also get shut down, but they stay longer in years, all right? And these will become your long-term protectors. So this is how it works. When the B cell antibody, you go from an alpha to delta, the effectiveness of the antibody will decrease. But then when it gets to totally change to, epsilons and to other things, your antibody no longer recognize the epsilon, then obviously you're going to have infections. But the T cells will still be there to handle this particular variant, because a lot where the spike may change, a lot of the other proteins, like the membrane protein, the nuclear protein, they don't change. They're not as promiscuous as the spike protein. They don't change. This long-term memory remember these things and be able to handle the virus through these molecules, even though the spikes are changing. All right. So your long-term memory after infection is very good. The long-term memory after vaccination, it's okay, but not as good, right? But it's still long-term memory. So let me stop here. These are the trusted sites that I go to, in particularly Medscape. It's a very good. They're very technical, but they also bridge between the non-technical and also the business affair and the regulatory affair. So and it's very, very reputable. It's my go-to place to get technical and non-technical information. I will also give you this so you don't have to copy it. I'll make a slide of it so that you can click on it and get a link. The JAMA, this is the Journal of American Medical Association network. They have very good information. The CDC put out weekly reports, so you can track really week by week how things are going in the COVID world. Now the following are the YouTube channels. I still like the JAMA channels. They give you a lot of trusted information. This channel, Matt Graham, is very good. Mobeen Saeed, I like it. He converts science into cartoon, and he actually draw it in front of you. So you get to understand a lot of these complex pictures that I show you in cartoons. And then he also have experts to come online to talk about things. So, it's not perfect, but I think it serves the purpose. There are a lot of other good ones, but once you get a lot of the vocabularies, you can then go to the Joe's YouTube and be able to tell whether someone's lying to you or whether someone is telling the truth. So why wait in such a circus? So this is the world I know. Work in a company, you have the R&D group, after the R&D, you do the pilot plan to scale it up, and then you do manufacturing. The marketing would then do the sales and marketing in the sequential fashions. You have the management that kind of coordinate all the facts. And then when the product gets out, the real world starts taking your product, and like the study in Singapore and in Israel, you have the scientific organizations, clinical research, patient advocates, and competing research try to take you down and promote their product. All of these are good, right? They serve to keep you guys honest because you put out a product and these guys keep you honest. These are the post-market surveillance, and FDA mandated this. And after that, you have then the regulator, the FDA, the CDC, the NIH, and outside of the United States, you have WHO and different medical associations. Right? Whoever, internal medicines, the vaccines, and whatnot, they all have medical association. They all have people overlooking and make policy and make guidelines. This is the world of medicine working barely above water. Not always smooth, but barely above water, all right? And you can actually see it, that you have a drug, that you have people outside checking on your drugs, whether it works, and then the FDA, CDC, based on the data they have seen, now they make recommendations, they change mid-course, they say, wait a minute, the mask is probably still needed because we're seeing that the vaccinated group still carrying the virus, and we cannot tell who's carrying the virus and who not. And worse, the vaccinated people are more gutsy to go party, to do, to go back to the activities that we enjoy. So we are more want to go out and we may be spreading virus to groups that are vulnerable. But what is the world of medicine in chaos is this. This is the world of medicine in chaos. We're doing real-time R&D by internet, by social medias, and every group that has anything to do with it, look at the products and give opinions whether they need it or not. Now we are doing R&D in real time. That's why we are in such a chaotic pace. So we need to get back to what we know. Medicine is very complex. Doing it this way will never get done. We'll continue to have confusion. We need to get back to the world that we know. So the last point is, how do I make my decision? Love your neighbor is what we asked to do. And I know I'm healthy. I haven't been infected. I know now I'm vaccinated. For sure, I'm not going to die from COVID-19, but I don't want to be the one who spread to my loved one. And I need to protect these guys, right? So, love my neighbor. If I have to act on it, I would take the vaccine, and I have no problem putting on my mask. Roman 13 asks us to respect authorities, but I would say yes, as long as the policy don't cause me to sin against God and of course my conscience. And lastly, I have to keep my faith. Not keeping my faith is no different than the Israelites in wandering in the desert, tempting God. And if the kingdom of God above everything and live righteously, and he will give me wisdom to conduct my daily business and give me everything I want. So
hey, thank you, Herb. That was another great presentation with all the scientific data and sometime above our understanding. I feel I'm going back to medical school and then the basic science again. So I have one.
So what have I missed?
Wait.
Wow.
Everybody mute, please.
Can everybody mute, please?
All right.
Can they hear me?
Okay.
Wait, hold on.
Sorry, I went over time again.
No problem. So thank you so much. And I have one little comment and one question, and I'm gonna start asking the question based on the fact that you did not include it in your presentation first, and going down all the way down to eventually the one that probably you already answered them. So it seems like you have commented that the vaccine it's probably give you a longer protection than natural immunity than infected. Infected antibody, infected patient produces natural antibody that lasts shorter time than vaccine. Therefore, even if people get infected with vaccine, should get vaccinated. Is that correct?
Natural infections and vaccines, they give you a different profile of protections. Natural infections, because you're exposed to the entire virus, the immune response is broader. So you're not only against the spike, you're against the nuclear capsid proteins, your membranes, and whatever else that tickle your immune system. The vaccine, as of now, only carry instructions for the spike protein. In fact, one region of the spike proteins. And Arbeit, it's a very good, a very effective one, but the spectrum is very narrow. After infections, it's your questions. Your immune memory will go down. But a lot of those individuals, upon re-exposure to the virus, they probably still will not show symptoms even beyond 6 months or 8 months. Because even though the antibody may not be detectable, the T cells memory will still be there. And when the T cells seeing the virus again, it will then kick up in high gear. Now, the only difference is when, let's say a year after the initial infections, your antibody level is gone, your T cell is still there. You get exposed to the virus, your T cells say, hey, I need to get in gear again. But it will take that T cells couple of days to get in gear and to make antibody and to get angry T cells to go attack the infected cells. So during that period of time, you're still vulnerable, that you're carrying viruses, you don't feel good. And so that's for that. But if you take a vaccines 90 days after infections, that will boost your response so that now you have protections that goes beyond a few years. How long, I don't know, because we are all new in this thing, but I'm sure after the initial infections, if you get a boost 90 days later, you are probably good for a long while. Don't quote me. I would bet that you have a good year and a half without having to worry about anything. Now, the worst case is this COVID, it's like flu virus. It keeps mutating, all right? If it mutates every 3-4 months, then whatever if you're infected with one strain and then a few months later, the whole world is now on a totally different strain of virus, then your natural immunity may not protect you. So we're learning all these things in real time.
Okay, thank you. The other question is, how about ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine?
So just to backtrack, hydroxychloroquine, you heard it from President Trump, last year. And subsequently, there were quite a few clinical studies. Hydroxychloroquine is an anti-parasite drug. So how is that going to fight against virus? A lot of people scratching their head, but nevertheless, a lot of clinical studies were done. There was some marginal effect, but not good enough to say that hydroxychloroquine by itself can be a magic drug. And so then people drifted over to ivermectin, is another drug that control parasite. Same thing, there were quite a few clinical studies done. Nothing stood out that say by itself it's working as a magic drug to control COVID virus, but there's something there. So now people say, well, what about combinations? So there's still study ongoing to look at these anti-parasite drugs, whether they can be the magic drugs. But my take is you can probably incorporate these in your arsenal as two drugs that, in combination with other drugs, that you can use to fight COVID. Having said that, in India, quite a few individuals, because of the parasite infections, quite a few people were on ivermectin and on hydroxychloroquine. Now, if you be cynical about it, if these drugs were so magical in controlling COVID, why is that there's so many infections in India, and as a result of that, we're now seeing Delta. So it tells you that those drugs, even though maybe they have some marginal benefits, but they're not magic drugs. But in combination with other drugs, maybe.
Okay, another question. How effective is mask? Is it, can you pin a number? Why mask versus non-mask? Why are we being commanded by CDC to wear masks indoor?
Yeah, to me, masks, well, it's my personal feeling. First of all, what kind of mask? N95 or M95, it tells you that it filters out 95% of the particles the size of viruses. Okay, you still have 5% getting through or coming out. All right, so they're not 100% foolproof. That's one. I'm not using 95 because I couldn't breathe too well with 95. So I use one of those cloth masks, but has a pocket in it. And I do put another piece of mask filter in it. So I'm double mask, right? It allows me to breathe easier, but offer me a better chance to filter things out. Now, question is, do you want to keep the virus in or virus out? So do I worry about someone cough and virus get through the mask into my nose? I probably don't, because I don't have people coughing around me all the time. If I see someone walking their dog coming at me, I sometimes I walk across the street, right? Sometimes so you don't have people coughing in front of you. Even at work, you are kind of at a safe distance. So putting a mask to worry about not worry about virus flying into your nose, it's not the purpose. To me, if today I'm unlucky, I'm vaccinated. If I'm unlucky once I get exposed to virus, and in those 3 days I have high viral content in my nose and my saliva, the mask serves to keep the virus in so that I don't spread. That's how I use masks. Now, when I go out, but I don't know when I'm going to be that lucky one to get virus exposure. So whenever I go out, I wear masks.
Okay, thank you. I have one last question here, and then I'll open up to the live question. So do you recommend a third booster dose of vaccine?
So if you believe the immune system that I believe, that I just showed you in the last slide, you're going to have long-term memory. The antibodies will go down in level. You have both memory T and B cells in your body, and if you get exposed to it, they will come live. All right, so you likely you're going to have long-term protection. Now, long-term protection doesn't mean that, for example, you as a physician, you can come across someone cough in your face, get exposed to a very large viral dose. And in the subsequent days, that large viral dose will multiply into something huge that really make you miserable, even though you're vaccinated. All right. So in that sense, taking a boost give you
You're muting.
Wait.
Hold on. We accidentally muted you.
Where is he?
Hold on. We accidentally muted you.
I can't find him. Just tell him to
Remember.
unmute.
I got.
Can you,
Unmute,
can,
yeah.
okay. Thank you.
I got it. So in that sense, if you take a boost for someone who are high risk, for example, I think CDC came out with a recommendation today. They're going to give a booster shot. They don't call it a booster shot, but they will immunize again the immunocompromised. These are the individuals who don't really respond to the vaccine the first time, somehow because their immune system is subpar. Some people have really defect in the immune system. They are not capable of making T and D cell immunity. So those folks, CDC decided, as a matter of fact, today, they want to give those individuals a booster or a shot. And so make sure that they have better coverage. I would also will say high risk group extended hopefully to someone like yourself who are facing the COVID patients every day. And the first
Okay, this is the second one.
the first responder, they really deserve a boost because I would feel better. Because they don't have time to build up the immunity. For me, I probably sit at home. If I get exposed to virus today, I can probably get sick for a few days. All right, I can afford it. So what? I take a break for 3 days, and I take a vacation. But a lot of people cannot afford it because they are vulnerable, because they're exposed to these viruses all the time.
I have a little comment here before I open a question. I think a lot of lay people don't understand, and it take me a whole course of immunology in medical school to understand, and in this setting is we just too short of time. So there's a difference between when people say antibody and the T cells and the B cell, because antibody is a little guy, it's like a single soldier. They go to attack the enemy. And I will compare the B cell and T cell to the carrier, the big ship, big army that you go and attack the army. So if you can think of it that way, then you understand. So antibody is a very short-term attack to the antigen, to the foreign body, to the virus. And the T cell and B cell are the one who build up the army. When the enemy comes, you attack. So I just saw on the screen, there's somebody asked constantly about monoclonal antibody compared to vaccine. And just as, just trying to explain it, sometimes it's really hard to explain the difference between the term antibodies and T cells and B cell.
Yeah.
Am I saying the right way, Dr. Chow?
Yeah, the antibody, I would equate it as a long distance missile, ICBM. Right? You can release the antibodies from the B cells locally in the spleen or in the lymph node, and then the antibody will travel everywhere and will neutralize virus. The T cells carry both missile and also they're good in hand-to-hand combat. Hand-to-hand combat, it's equivalent to what I call go in and kill the viral infected cell, because the infected cells carry some antigens or virus on it, and the T cells will see those antigens and say, "Ha, you're infected with virus. I'm going to come in and just contact the cells and kill it by hand-to-hand combat." The T cells also can unload missile. They are not antibody, but they are little chemical compounds. Then these compounds can also cause problem for viruses. So the T cells have both ICBM, and they got good in hand-to-hand combat. The antibody is only good as a ICBM. Now, you just mentioned something. You hear that monoclonal antibody, Trump was injected or treated with monoclonal antibody, and the monoclonal antibody helped clear virus. monoclonal antibody, it's not natural antibody that made by your body. Antibody that are made in your system, it's called polyclonal antibody, not monoclonal. They are polyclonal. If I see the virus, I make all kinds of clones. Each clone will look at each part of virus. Monoclonal is an artificial thing that we created in the laboratory. Somehow we can make a single clone that make antibody that latch onto one part of the virus. So in the natural antibodies are all polyclonal. The artificial drug, it's monoclonal antibody. So there are two different things. Yeah, that's it. So just remember monoclonal and polyclonal. The polyclonal is what we talk about today. It's where your B cells memory and the B cells will have many different clones, and each clones will make one different antibody against the virus. But collectively, there are multiple clones. That's why they call polyclonal.
Hey,
The drug.
Dr. Chow, we have a practical question concerning our youth. We heard a lot of school masking the kids, not masking the kids when they go to school, concern about children getting vaccine. What do you think about children get COVID-19 infection? What is the prevalence of that? And are children having a better natural immunity than adults? And the masking children, what in general?
Well, we know kids are more resilient, more resistant to COVID infections, but that may not be true. If I have to be accurate, they're more resilient to this particular SARS-CoV-2 virus. The adults probably are more vulnerable than teenagers, and I hope that's true with the younger ones. What I don't know is it because up to now we have more adults to infect, and before the kids get it, that's what most of the manifestations of the COVID-19 is in adults, because there are more adults walking around doing things, and the kids are not partying, doing dangerous activities. In the playground, they only play with other kids that are not infected. They're not around infected individuals, but adults in the last year are the one who's getting the brunt of the COVID. It's because by chance we're infecting the adult first, and that's why we're seeing the kids are not being the victims. And if it is, then the kids may be just equally vulnerable to the SARS-CoV-2 than the adults. Now, I'm hoping that that's not the case. What I also don't know is that kids, let's say they are more resistant, right? Well, I'm hoping that the mask may not be the gear to control. I would rather see them religiously use hand sanitizer. They don't rub their eyes. They don't have behavior that will transmit the virus, because they're not sitting in front of the guy coughing in their face all the time, right? They're mostly touching feelings, and kids are not getting infected. So if they practice washing hands, I think it's probably more effective than masks. But not knowing not only whether the kids are more vulnerable, not knowing what's going on with the kids these days, I would err on side of cautions that, yeah, washing hands and wearing masks, because who knows, they are sitting in front of an adult who's been vaccinated but don't know he's a carrier of high virus in in the mouth. So at this stage, there's so many question marks. I rather err on side of caution, so that we need to get the viral replication rate way down, because as long as we let the virus keep circulating in the public, and it will keep making variants. And then we're talking about Delta, Lambda, Epsilons, and just keep going. And maybe we will then evolve into a variant that even we won't see the Moderna at 80% anymore. Maybe the Moderna is now at 20%. And if we let the virus keep having that stage, keep evolving, that is going to happen. So we can risk that. So I would rather do everything we can to stop a virus from circulating. That's the only way. That's why Australia has the zero tolerance policy. That's why you look at the China, well, they're having the Delta now big time. I don't know whether you heard, there was a plane that carries a Delta passengers landed in the east side of China, and within a month, now Delta, it's in many parts of the country. It's just that fast. And so we can't let that happen. So China has a zero tolerance policy. That's why, whenever they have problems, they shut down, they lock down, they test everybody just to make sure that the virus will die off. And if the virus don't circulate in our body, what's going to happen to the virus? The virus is not going to survive. The virus that's sitting on top of my mouth, in a few days, the max, I would give it a day, it would die. All right. Now, it won't go away. COVID is an RNA virus. If I were to tell you this virus is like a polio or smallpox, they are DNA virus. They don't have a animal vector, right? So when we stop viral circulations of polios and smallpox in humans, we're done. The virus, it cannot propagate itself, right? We're done. But with this virus, it can go to civet cat, it can go to cattle, it can go to bat, it can go to, in fact, I don't think a lot of people know, we actually make vaccines, coronavirus vaccines for cattle, for cats, for dog. And I think we even have one for pig. I don't know how often they're used in animals, but we make vaccine for coronavirus. And so people say, well, how can you make vaccine? How do you have information to make vaccine? We've been studying this vaccine for years. We just don't have a vaccine for human because we have no need for it. And now we have need for it. And so happened that we have some 10 years of knowledge. Why is that we're studying it? Because the SARS-CoV-1 was a nasty one, right? And it was the first SARS, and it was nasty. The subsequent SARS was even worse. It killed people, 30% mortality. So after 2011, SARS research was very popular among researchers. And I don't know why, I'm not a veterinarian expert. I don't know why they make vaccines for cattle and for pigs and for cat, but I know they make that. So we even have animal models studying these things. And now with messenger RNA and these DNA tools, we know things happen faster because now we can just type in the code. We can make a vaccine. It used to be we have to generate a whole lot of stuff to make vaccine. Now we can just go to the lab and type in the code on a computer. And I bet if I have to make a vaccine, a prototype vaccine nonetheless, for Lambda, I bet that's already done. Someone's already have that vaccines ready to be tested because the tools now is totally different than when I was doing research years ago. And a lot of these tools came out of cancer research. And because now we're making a lot of cancer drugs using the same kind of tool.
Hey, Dr. Chow, thank you so much. You just explained, at least for me, some of the very important answers to many questions that people ask. But for example, people ask, how about herd immunity? And my understanding from you just talk about is, we don't want to wait until that time and nobody get vaccinated, because just like the principle I learned from medical school, if you want to kill in the infection, bacterial infection, you kill it hard the first time. You don't let it meander around slowly, wait until it disappear. Maybe your body develops antibody. No, because just the chances of mutation is so high, it might mutate a different variant and much more deadly. So
Actually, let me add on to it. There's one thing even worse. Most of us, even if you're not vaccinated, and you see the mortality rate is not very high, right? Now, Delta may be a different story, but for the previous versions, say Alpha, Beta, the mortality is not very high. So most people, the reason for them not to vaccinate is that, well, it's a common cold. I get exposed to virus. I'm down for a couple of days. I'll come out stronger. But what's the worry? What's the worry is that I hope you're not playing Russian roulette, because among those who get COVID and survive, 30% of them are called long hauler COVID. So far, we only have this for less than a year. There are people after the infections, they just never recover. They're still tired. They cannot go exercise. They have pain. They have brain fog. Now, if you want to play Russian roulette and say, well, I'm the lucky one now, after the exposure, I'm going to come out okay. I hope you're not the one who become a long hauler among that 30% of unlucky ones. Now, there are remedies now for the long haulers, but I don't know whether those remedies will cure it, or maybe it's something that it's going to be with us, with those folks for a long time. And one other thing, I'm also going to say it, because my other interest is making Parkinson and Alzheimer vaccines. This particular virus have a tropism, or I shouldn't say tropism, as a way of engaging pathology in brain. So you actually, you hear people, I lost my smell. I have no taste. Well, those are neurological problems. Brain fog. Guess what? Something here. It's messed up. We now actually in the journal last year, early on, we already see that this COVID-19 may at some point be a catalyst for increased cases for Parkinson and Alzheimer. We don't know, but there are neurologists that are monitoring this big time, because we are seeing, in fact, some of the individuals after infections, they start developing early signs of Parkinson. Scary thought? I don't know, but certainly for me, I don't want to play Russian roulette, even though I'm 67 years old. I bet if I take a dose, I'm healthy enough. If I take a dose of the COVID, SARS-CoV-2, I probably come out okay. But am I going to be risking myself become a long hauler? Is my Alzheimer a pre-Alzheimer? Maybe I'm borderline Alzheimer. Maybe after COVID-19, it will kick me into a full-blown Alzheimer. It's not something that I want to play with. I would rather take the vaccine.
Okay, thank you. We almost running out of time, but I try to summarize everybody's important questions, but I want to open up to one or two questions right now to people who ask live. If you do have a burning question, please keep you brief, and then we'll try to answer it. Hello.
A live question. Yeah.
Hey, Chuck.
David, hey,
Chuck.
David, and Dr. Chow, thank you for the wonderful presentation. What is the delay in vaccinating the children? You know, we're used to vaccinating children at a very early age.
Well, you see that list of potential, I call it immunological related side effect. Um, those side effects are not not particularly associated with COVID only, because we've seen a lot of the same side effect, the Guillain-Barré syndromes, the anaphylaxis, and all that in flu vaccines, even in some of the bacteria vaccines, we've seen those. But we haven't tried to mass vaccinate kids in a lot of the vaccines. There was an incident in Philippines on the dengue virus vaccines in kids, I think less than 9 years old. It turned out to be a bad decision. Some kids developed issues. So the FDA is very careful when it comes to children. So that's why the 11 to 17 was the last group to get vaccinated after hundreds and hundreds of data points with adults. And we are seeing these, few thousand side effects. Now we are comfortable. And even with that, we're now seeing some kids have myocarditis and pericarditis, right? So even with that group, you have to wonder, well, they're just things that we don't understand. Medicine is so complex, right? We just cannot understand every side effect, understand the genetic implications, who's at risk and who's not. So on the side of caution, kids under 12 is the group that is the last to get vaccinations until we know two things. One, do we have to change the vaccination schedule? Maybe the younger kids, if you change the schedule from, 20 days to 56 days, maybe all the side effects are gone in kids. Well, we don't know that. What if we decrease the dosage from, whatever whatever we give to adults, we decrease the dosage. Maybe all of the side effects are gone. But all of those things require studies. So if you look at the clinicaltrial.org database, if you look at Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson's, and Moderna, well, you thought, what are they doing these days, right? And making so much money and going to the beach. No, each of them are doing, I think last time I checked, they have 60 some odd clinical trial ongoing. Each of them, it's a very large study program that costs millions of dollars. Well, why? Because we need answer. Do we need to adjust dose in kids? Do we need to change the schedule in kids? All of these things FDA require for them to show data in order to get approval. So now it goes to the question, well, the emergency approval was done in March, FDA, you rush it. Well, now it takes so long for you to do the final approval. Why? Because the companies ongoing doing studies, they're feeding information to FDA. FDA now taking all of those nuances of data to try to make a decision what to do, because by approving the drug, you're also labeling the drug, how to use it, who's going to get it, how often are you going to use it, what are you going to expect in terms of good and bad side effect. And so when it comes to kids, some of the studies are still ongoing. So I'm hoping that they get it done soon, but not until things done. FDA's approval is going to be delayed.
Understood, but at the same price, these kids are paying the highest penalty.
That's true. That's true. But I hope they can make exceptions. There are kids that we know they're at risk for viral infections. So I hope that they can do it by stages, take care of those first, and then it just, I tell you, it's I was on the vaccine safety committee in 2000 2019, when they were talking about this dengue virus. We have meetings. We didn't know why kids after vaccinations get sicker than the kids who are not vaccinated. I tell you, you don't even want to talk to parents. So, how many of these kids come down to weird stuff that attributed to vaccinations? Just one. All you need is one. So yeah, it has to be, they're at risk. So we have to monitor. The news is all over the place. Kids are getting into emergency room, filling up the bed in the South. So we need to understand, why are they there? Why are they vulnerable? Are the symptoms they have is just easy symptoms to treat? Maybe it's just high fever, go away in 5 days. I don't know. It's really science, in real time. I don't have a lot of answers, but it is a group that is important for FDA. It's important. So that's why I said, without knowing it, I'd rather wear a mask, because I don't want to be the one who passed on virus to a 10 years old and knowing that the kid may die. And I just don't want to be there.
Hey, we run out of time. Thank you, Dr. Chow. It was really a great presentation, and it just
Thank you for having me.
bring it to light that medicine is a lot more complicated than what we imagine. And also, God has made our body so wonderful that that there's the intelligent design of our body that we do have to recognize. It's a lot more complicated than what we can understand. And
That gave me reason to believe, right? I look at the wonderful design of the immune system, just like the universe and the star in the skies. That give me reason to believe.
Oh, yeah. We'll invite Chuck for that topic about the universe next time. So let me close. Huh?
And just want to tell everybody too, this has been recorded. So we will be sending a link so you can
As a
see this.
request.
And because I think a lot of people came in late and some of that stuff went right over my head. So I have to go back and listen to it again. It'd be good.
And feel free to email me at the end of the slides. I have my emails. Feel free to contact me or go through David.
Okay. So let me close up in prayer, and then we can all go home. Dear Lord, thank you so much for Dr. Chow's presentation, and we thank you for giving us a body that we can defend against so many viruses and bacteria and so many diseases on our own. But you really give us a vaccine. And after this presentation, I hope that many people who listen to this can make a wise decision on their own decision to get vaccine or not to get vaccine. And Father, we thank you for this time. And again, we pray for our country, we pray for our community, the safety and the virus surge. We pray that you protect everybody, especially those who are in this meeting here. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Do I have to stop the recording?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.